Welcome to Garden Wise Adventures. My name is Malie, and today we have a special guest with us again. It's Dan Owen. Because in the last video that I showed you, maybe it was the last, I can't really remember, my medlar tree was trying to fall over in a windstorm. And Dan is an arborist.
I am.
And having an arborist, I think, in these cases is really important. Why do we need an arborist, Dan, to look at a tree and assess it?
Because we know about trees.
Why do you know about trees? What have you
Because
done
I've
to
been
know about
studying
trees?
the thing since 1970-something. I am an ISA certified arborist. I've been doing this stuff for years. I've just been working on it.
Perfect. Well, I know trees, and I could probably look at the tree and guess what's going on, but I think Dan could really look at the tree and tell us exactly what's going on as far as he can tell. I mean, obviously we can't look at the roots right now and see what's going on, but let's show you the tree and have Dan go through it, and let's kind of figure out what happened.
Yeah. Well, we could actually look at the roots, but I don't have I think it's $35,000 for ground penetrating radar.
Aha.
Some big companies use that, and it's...
Okay, so here's Dan. Here's the tree. This is my medlar. It's been in the ground since 2008 or 9. And I'll show you the video. We're going to pause right here for the video, show you what it looked like when it was going over. And you can see the cracks in the ground right there. So, Dan, what are your thoughts? Is this tree savable?
This tree is savable. This wind knockover happened 2 days ago. And you're looking up here at the small, soft, new leaves, and there's no wilting going on this side. And if there was any wilting going on, it would have been on this side. Because if it had snapped roots, they would have been on this side. And the vascular tissue comes up, gets to here, and that's a nice fresh leaf. So we're pretty sure you don't have major roots damage downstairs.
Thank heavens. Okay.
Yes. The reason why I went this direction, it's probably because you have bilateral roots, main roots coming out that were coming left and right underneath each other.
That's what it looked like when it was
look
heaving.
Right here, there's one there. If I pull this around, you can see it's sticking better over here. Okay, it's not moving as much. You can see there's a pivot point right here, and that's where it goes in.
And it's interesting because the entire ground moves when you do that.
Yeah, the wind we had was actually coming out of the northwest, which was that direction.
Yeah.
And it's leaning 90 degrees. That's just because the force applied, that's the way it gave. And that's all you've got to deal with. So.
Perfect. So I'm glad it can be saved. When would you look at a tree that's toppled over and say it can't be saved?
When you have major breakages. Major breakages, as in if you have the whole thing coming over, roots out of the ground, and on a temperamental tree. If it's a tough tree and you have roots out of the ground, sometimes there's some leeway there. Like if you happen to have something like a quakey and you tip it over and you got a root popping out of the ground on one side of it, but it's not all the way over and you haven't snapped the trunk, you might be able to save that if you wanted to, but I'm not a big fan of quakies unless I have a cabin, which is where they belong.
Yes.
And if you want to have a cabin, have all the quakies you want. You probably won't even have to go to a nursery and buy them. They're there already, right?
So would you say if somebody, like in this last windstorm, has a tree lying on the ground, there's not a lot of major wiltage, could they try and stake it back up?
They could try unless there is enough breakage on the thing to where it is ugly.
Okay.
If you want to stand it back up, do what you can, like we're going to be doing here in a few minutes, and stand it up, and you've got broken branches on the other side, you got twisted this, twisted that, and you say, that's ugly, and that's going to take approximately 5 to 15 years to heal and look good again.
So why not plant a new one anyway?
Why not plant a new one? If you've got the time to make it good, and it was planted there as a gift to you from your dad when you bought the house, and you want to save that tree, by all means, put some effort into it. Make that tree happy. Do what you can to save it. If not, take some cuttings and make some more.
So now that we've assessed the tree, looked at it.
The tree is assessed. This tree is fine. It's just getting it up. Right. Total perpendicular to Mother Earth may not happen. All right. It may happen. It may not happen.
It was leaning a bit before.
A leaning tree is okay. Love it for what it is. If it's got some damage, guess what? So does everybody else and everything else.
Okay. I love that analogy.
And we just got to put up with it. And this is going to give you nice medlar gem.
Yes.
Through
the years. Okay, so now why do you think this happened to this tree?
This tree?
Yeah.
This tree probably because you would have rocks like this size
Yes.
underneath the ground. It sent the roots down. You're watering this on a very irregular basis. You're putting the water all on the top. Okay, and I don't know how long you've been doing that, but as often as you have, if you put the water on the top 3 days a week, and you don't have really good soaky rains like we don't here in the Great Basin, the roots are going to be on the top, which they
That
are.
makes total sense. This was all lawn until 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So all its formative years, it was being watered 3 times a week with the lawn.
3 times a week with the lawn. And the Great Basin is not well known for having good drenching rains on a regular basis. We have had them over the last decade since we've had the La Nina weather cycles, long, cold, wet springs. That's what we've got. It sort of hampered this, but in order to get those roots deeper, you need to clear away some of those rocks, because when roots go down on trees or bushes or any other woody thing, goes down, hits an object, an obstacle, they go left and right.
That totally makes sense.
Yeah, they just stop going down. Some trees want to have a taproot. There's not very many of them, and most of them, like palm trees, well, palm trees don't have taproots. They have fibrous things that go any which way and down mostly, but some trees just don't go down. The vast majority don't have a taproot.
Now, the other thing we were talking about is how the trees are planted.
Yes.
I can promise you this tree was not planted the way we were discussing, but what about that?
It was, I'm going to say 4 years ago because that sounds good, but 4 years ago, over this direction, about a half a mile, I had a neighbor call me, and they were out of town, and they said that, Dan, our Swedish aspen is falling over. Can you go look at it and tell me what's wrong with it? And yes, I went and looked. Wind was still blowing bad when I got there, and their Swedish aspen had been planted 2 feet from the house.
So no place to go.
No place to go for the roots. It was standing straight up because I'd been to their house before, and now it was down at about 30 degrees. My job, I go there and I start looking, and I start digging up around the root because the soil is all massively heaved out and pushed out of place. And I find that the plastic, not the burlap, but the plastic webbing is still over the root ball, as well as the wire cage. The roots could not get out of that plastic bag, that it was planted in. And so, luckily for the tree, for the next several years, it managed, since it was planted too deep, but some landscapers do that too, it formed roots at the top, came out of the top of the bag, and sent roots 180 degrees from each other, right against the house, this way and that way. And when the windstorm came over and blew it over, it went over just like it was a hinge, a springy hinge. You know those little doors that you open up and boom, 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 boom. That's what it did. And there was no coming back up unless I wanted to cable something into the house and put an eye bolt through their brick, second-story brick house. And that wasn't going to happen. So I shot it up, zoom, 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 zoom.
It was gone.
And picked up the red ball, took a picture, sent it to them, and they had dirty words that were not going to stay on YouTube. So,
yes, because they lost their favorite tree.
They lost one of their favorite trees because some knucklehead landscaper had a deal to plant all the neighborhood, and they did it as fast and as cheap as possible.
So are you suggesting we take the cage off the roots?
The cage needs to come off the roots.
Okay, one last question.
Yes.
Could it have been anything to do with the canopy? Because this is a pretty dense canopy. What would you say about that?
Really, I can see daylight through this thing. It is fairly dense where it's at. These leaves
They're huge.
Are considered wind sails. Not like the fancy thing you put over the thing and the shade sails, something like that. Because that does catch an awful lot of wind. A tree such as, oh my goodness, this is Siberian elm. You can see daylight through that all the time.
Right.
Okay, you can look right over there and see that honey locust, and you can see the house behind it.
Yes.
There are trees that let a lot of wind through. This one is catching a lot of them. It
probably just exacerbated the problem, not caused the problem.
We can say it's part of the contributing factors, but really, you get Medlar jam off this, and you better not try eating honey locust beans because they don't make jam.
Those look disgusting.
At all. Yeah, they're pretty bad.
Okay, perfect. So now that we know the whys and kind of how to, not maybe prevent it, but at least make sure that the likelihood is less.
Less.
What can we do to fix it? And do we need to fix this?
We can fix it. We can leave it as is. I think it's probably not a good idea because you've stressed it this direction, and we need
And
to.
it's leaning. Yeah.
It is leaning. It is more lean than you really want.
So now that we've discussed all of the above, what are we going to do now to stand it up a little bit?
We're going to take advantage of some geometry and physics, and we're going to pound this post further into the ground. And I've got it at this angle so that it doesn't pull as hard. And we're going to wrap a strap around this thing and pull it this direction as much as we can without getting close to breaking it. We're going to use straps because the strap will spread that load out about 1 inch. Okay, so we're going to use the strap on this one because if I take a strap, that distributes the load pretty evenly.
Yeah.
Okay. However, and we do this because if we use the rope,
My really big thick rope?
your really big clothesline, you take a rope and put 100 and 200 pounds of pressure right
It'll
there
eventually
like
cut
that.
your arm off.
That's going to do something bad, in a short amount of time. And I realize that we're not going to do that here to this tree. We might put 200 pounds of pressure on it, and if we do, we want to make sure we spread that out.
Yeah, that's. I mean, it's tightly in there. Back this way.
What's better is that?
Yeah, whatever you can do. I think a lot of the staking, in my opinion, is probably not going to get it very much straight because it was a little crooked to begin with. I think it's going to make it so that if we get that next big wind come next week.
But we have a nice another wind coming next week?
I don't know, but if we do, it's not going to snap the roots that are on.
Okay, one thing you want to remember when you're strapping a tree is that if you take this branch right here and you pull really, really hard on it, this thing is attached to this outside of the tree.
Right.
You have a much greater chance of breaking this branch and yanking it off.
Oh, that's good to know.
So you don't strap it here and put 200 pounds on the thing, pulling it this way, and hoping that the next wind is just never going to come, because it will. So what you do is you go up here and you go up
that makes
here.
a lot of sense.
And this one here, go around all three of these, go up here, and then come here.
I don't think it's going to go that high to strap unless you undo it again. Okay, so Dan is screwing a screw into my tree.
Ouch!
Is that bad?
You'll feel a little prick. In you go. There we go. All right. That.
So why did you do that?
Because that bark is slippery, and that the friction coefficient, blah blah blah, is too slick on this thing to be able to stay on that slick bark.
Right.
If it was a rough bark, like something else, like a cottonwood or a black locust, it could stay there and stay at a 45-degree angle, which is no, that's not a 60-degree angle. About what it is right now. But that's slick bark, and you can't have this stuff hanging on to it very hard.
Yeah.
Very well. It's not as grippy enough. And if I do happen to break that branch off, well, I'll make it just a little bit less leaning, right?
A little bit less leaning, yes.
Okay. Okay. Are you ready to pull?
Yes.
3, 2, 1. You getting it?
Nope.
3, 2, 1. 3, 2.
There we go.
Got it. So this is a man-made structure, and what we're doing here is we're going to introduce a lot of tension here. We've already said you don't want to put it on this one here because you
Right,
can
'cause
rip
you
that
can pull it
branch
off.
off, because that is where it will peel. But when you put a hang stress on this one, it could break too.
Right.
If you're trying to do this with notoriously brittle trees like red buds,
Yes.
everybody's got a bad red bud. It's going the wrong direction. You just pull it in, it crack. Oh my goodness, you got lost half the tree. You don't want to do that to this thing because nobody else has a Medlar.
I think there's maybe 5 in the state of Utah.
You may know the people better than I do, because
Unless there's
I've
some
seen
hiding
one,
out there.
and believe me, I've seen a lot of trees around here.
Yeah.
And this is the one that I know of. If you know those people, good for you.
Yeah, I think there's 5.
But you don't want to tighten this thing up until it twangs.
Okay, that's good to know.
Because you don't know how much stress this thing is going to take. Okay.
Right, because I'm thinking also if we get another heavy windstorm.
Heavy windstorm.
This
is going to hold. I think
Yeah.
this probably says somewhere on it is good for 6,000 pounds. This tree isn't 6,000 pounds. That includes
But we
this
don't want
type
that
of
branch
6,000
to.
pounds. Yeah, we don't want that branch to experience that sort of torque on the thing.
Yeah.
But if it does, it doesn't. And, it is the furthest branch that away, and that will help straighten up the look of the tree. The trunk might still be going like this,
but
the rest of the tree will
Yeah.
go like this. And if this doesn't all work, we can still go and take off that branch right there.
Right.
And this branch right here. And give it the appearance that it is doing this number.
Yeah.
Don't make me look like a bitch.
I'll try not to.
All right.
Just don't do it yourself, Dan.
But yeah. And this is not the only thing we're going to be doing. We are going to soak this thing up, get this ground nice and soggy, and then we're going to try to rack and strap it further this way. Because the ground is still pretty darn dry, and dry ground doesn't pound or move around too much. We're going to make it
So that's just, I want to make a real point here.
Yeah.
When people, because people say, when I ask them how often they're watering their trees, I'm watering it for 20 minutes on drip every other day.
Yes.
Well, you're saying the ground is really dry?
It's really dry. Look at it.
I watered this for 4 hours 3 days ago.
3 days ago, and it's really dry. The texture of your ground is good ground. It's nice and arable. It drains well.
It drains well.
Good draining ground, which means you
Yes.
put the water on, it drains down past the roots where the roots aren't going to get
Into
it.
the rocks.
Then you got to do it again. You can look right here. See, you have moist soil right underneath this double ground bark here.
Yes.
Okay, it's moist here. It's not moist there.
Very interesting.
Okay, so you have to take that into account to pull this thing over because all these roots are still in there and they're stuck into some really stiff stuff.
Yeah.
And if you turn it all into mud,
then you can pull it right up.
It pulls up better.
Okay. So recap. Number 1, be careful how you plant. Be careful how you water.
Water.
Yes, water is the big thing. Water
Yes.
it deeply and infrequently.
Water deeply and as infrequently as you can. Of course, you don't have to water as often in springtime when it's still raining and cool. But once the 90+ degree temperatures get here,
Water more.
don't kill the tree.
Oh, do it.
Yeah, don't kill the tree
Yeah.
with that regimen. If you were used to watering every 2 weeks or something like that, with deep watering on the tree, when it was getting to be 60s, low wonderful degrees in April, 90 degrees, and you're going to kill that tree. It's
Okay,
not
so
ideal.
how often should I deep water my trees?
It depends on the temperature. And
So
when.
like these coming up 90 degree.
90 degrees.
100 degree
if
weeks.
it were me and it was an established tree, I would say once a week, deep water. You've got all the rest of the stuff underneath here right now. And
Yeah.
that's not all
Don't
the
wanna
stuff
kill
you have. You don't want to kill this stuff. But you want to get out here and put some big amount of water on there. If you consider the drip line out here, where the roots are, and they're not just here, they're over there.
Yeah.
Too. They're all over the place. Yeah, if you consider that, these are 1 GPH drippers.
Yes.
Okay, and you have how many of those in this circumference around the tree? If you could say 30,
Probably
and
about 30.
the other plants over here get a lot of that, you're only giving this thing 10 gallons.
Oh.
Since you're putting it on top of the ground, guess how much of that evaporates when it's 90?
Right.
Okay, so you need to come out here with a hose.
I do deep water my
Bring it
plants
over
with
there,
the hose.
put the hose on there, turn it on, a trickle. That would be, I don't know what the GPH is, and you're not going to put a meter on it anyways.
Right.
So turn on for as much of a trickle is that if that was a water fountain that you were turning on and getting off, you'd be pissed off if it was running that slow.
Okay.
Put it on there for several hours.
I really need to think about this because I've been trying to reduce the water on my landscape, but we cannot reduce the water on our trees.
Well, some of the trees, yes. I mean, you've got Medlar, native to England. You've
Yeah.
got Norway spruce, native to Norway. Behind the camera over there, you have a weeping, funky Colorado blue spruce. Those are native to not only the Rocky Mountain parts of the Colorados,
But the wet
but
parts.
out in the dry parts.
Oh, the dry. Oh.
They live out in the red rocks.
So do those need more or less
Those
water?
really need less water.
Okay, so anyway, we talked about water. Dan and I could talk forever, and we talked about plants.
Yeah.
We talked about where they're native to and how we could figure out how often to water. But that's not what this video is about.
This is about trees and making sure
I know,
they're straight.
we get sidetracked a lot. But anyway, so I'm going to water my trees better. We're going to pull it up a little bit straighter once I soak it to death almost.
Until it's a nice big muddy mess.
Yes. And then we're going to straighten it up a little bit more.
Don't invite the kids over to ride their bikes with it that day, okay?
I won't, because that's going to be a muddy mess. So anyway, we really appreciate having you here. And thank you so much, Dan. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And hopefully you guys go have a wonderful garden adventure.
See ya.